When the car came rushing towards them, Jason instinctively protected his sweetheart. I got scraped and fell by the side of the car, but he just impatiently pulled my hand away. Anna had a heart attack, and I had to take her to the hospital first. Stay here and wait for me. But Jason didn't wait for me. I was taken away by my long-lost first love. When Jason hurriedly called me, my first love who was applying medicine on my ankle suddenly spoke up. Will this hurt? Jason gritted his teeth and asked frantically. Who are you with? When Nick sneered at me both openly and in secret, Jason stood silently on the side. So, you're Jason's girlfriend. She smiled sweetly, tilted her head, and looked me up and down. If I put on my clothes, from behind, I look exactly like her. Isn't that right, Jason? She was almost openly implying that Jason was using me as a substitute. When the boy raised his eyes and met mine, he quickly looked away, almost as if he couldn't bear it. I didn't think about anything when I was with her. I just felt really cold tonight. Hands in my pockets, wanting to go back to the dormitory. Anna pouted, unhappy. So tell me, am I pretty or is she pretty? Another cold gust of wind. I spoke up before Jason. You guys go ahead and talk, I'm going back to the dorm. Just as I turned around, Anna caught up to me again. Clearly, she didn't want to let me go. Nora, are you mad? I'm just asking. I tried to break free from her grip. No, please let go of me. Anna held on tighter. I had to push a bit harder. She suddenly let go, stumbled back a few steps. She hit the utility pole behind her. Jason crushed his cigarette and immediately went over to support her, checking her up and down. How are you, Anna? Are you hurt? When he looked back at me, his eyes had darkened. Did I ever say she was in poor health? Nora, have a little self-awareness. 10 of you wouldn't be enough to make up for Anna. I wasn't sure if it was because of my push. I pursed my lips, took a step forward, about to apologize. Jason misunderstood and immediately stood in front of her. Stay away from her. I was already standing at the edge of the road, being blocked by Jason. I bumped into him and stumbled onto the road. Jason instinctively tried to pull me, letting go of Anna's hand he was holding. She also lost her balance and started to fall towards the road. Before I could react, a blinding light was coming towards us. The car was close by. Anna. Jason chose to grab Anna's hand and move in a different direction, abandoning me. I ended up falling by the car. Luckily, the car braked just in time, and I only accidentally twisted my ankle while avoiding it. Can't they just watch where they're going? The driver grumbled and drove off with just a sentence. How are you, Nora? Jason had just let go of Anna and was approaching me, but she suddenly sat helplessly on the ground. Jason, I think my heart is acting up. I didn't say much and just watched him run back to Anna and pick her up, but as he was about to leave, I grabbed his sleeve. It's too remote here, we can't flag down a cab, can we? Before I could finish, Jason furrowed his brows and impatiently pulled my hand away. Haven't you seen that Anna is in a more urgent situation than you? She's having a heart attack, and I have to take her to the nearest hospital. Wait here, I'll be back soon to pick you up. With that, he carried Anna away quickly. Can love really make people brainless? I just wanted to suggest getting his driver to pick us up. I sighed and couldn't help but admire him. The nearest hospital was over 10 kilometers away. Was he planning to run a marathon carrying her? I began to doubt my contract boyfriend. Yes, Jason and I are contractually together. I never liked him. He found me at the beginning of our sophomore year, his gaze arrogant, making me an offer I couldn't refuse. He needed a girlfriend in name only, to avoid his family's arranged dates. The only condition was secrecy, no interference in private matters. 1 year, for 1 million. I pretended to think hard for a moment and reluctantly agreed. Now I understand why he chose me and not someone else. It's because I look like his sweetheart, Anna. And now, Anna was back. I wondered if the contract would end early. The remaining $500,000 seemed like it might go down the drain. I thought this, and sighed once again. The next moment, a pair of shoes appeared in front of me. I looked up. How pathetic, abandoned on the roadside by a boyfriend with his mistress. Nick looked down at me disdainfully and taunted. It had been 2 years, 8 months, and 3 days since I last saw Nick. By then, he had become the hottest male star. I stared at him blankly, instinctively trying to save face. "You've got it wrong," he said seriously. I scared both of them away. "You may not know, but I self-taught martial arts." Nick sneered coldly, quite the tough talker, but then, he picked me up. It had been a while since I had hugged him again. Looking at the thin lips of the boy up close, I pursed my lips and blurted out. "I'm soft-hearted, you can test it if you don't believe me." If it had been Nick from 2.5 years ago, he would have kissed me right away. But now, he was the cold Nick. So, he only gave me a nonchalant glance. However, in the subject of making Nora not the most embarrassed but more embarrassed, Nick was always at the top of the class. He locked eyes with me with a half-smile. "What about now? Do you regret leaving me back then?" This question really embarrassed me. I cautiously didn't answer, instead nestling into his arms. "It's so cold, Nick." He paused for a moment, then held me a little tighter. He didn't say anything, but his steps quickened. Luckily, it was almost midnight. No one would see the sight of a male star entangled with his ex-girlfriend on the road. Nick led me back to the temporary apartment he rented nearby not far from our school. He casually explained that he had work in the area recently. I never thought it would be related to me. "Treat your own wound." Nick remained indifferent, tossing me a tube of ointment. I nodded, planning to wash my hands first. But as soon as I stood up from the sofa, he impatiently pushed me back down. "Do you want me to do it, but couldn't say it directly?" I tilted my head and let out a sigh. Nick sure had a rich inner monologue. The guy in front of me, focused and deliberately gentle in his movements, made me recall how he was 3 years ago. I couldn't help but really want to kiss him. Just as I was about to make a move, my phone rang at the most inconvenient time. Who's the jerk disturbing me from a good moment? Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Nick glance at the phone screen, a slight tug at the corner of his mouth, but he didn't say anything. Turned out it was Jason, the person in charge of paying me. My anger immediately subsided. "Nora, where are you? I told you to wait for me." Jason's tone seemed a bit urgent. "Sorry, I forgot to tell you. A friend picked me up," Nick chimed in. Suddenly, he spoke up. "Does this hurt?" He pressed his fingertip on my ankle. I shook my head. "I'm fine." "Nora, where are you with this friend?" Jason's tone suddenly became ambiguous. Why do I hear a man's voice? What are you doing at a man's place for so long? I couldn't talk back rudely. The salary for the second half of the year hasn't been paid yet. As I was pondering how to respond, Nick adjusted the pressure of his fingertip. Dragging his voice, he asked, "Is this comfortable?" I murmured in response. "Nora. What are you two up to? Don't you remember that you are my girlfriend?" Jason grumbled. Even through the screen, I could feel his inexplicable anger. It's none of his business. We agreed not to interfere in each other's private lives. I hung up the phone. Just as I was debating whether to continue kissing Nick, a sudden stinging pain shot through my ankle. Nick let go of my hand. He looked at me intently, his tone somewhat cold. "Don't you want to break up with him?" I bit my lip tightly, hesitating. That's $500,000 after all. And it seems like breaking up now would involve a penalty. As I contemplated, Nick seemed to see it as my reluctance to part with Jason. Suddenly, he grabbed my chin. Forced to meet his deep gaze. "Nora, you don't have a choice. You have to break up with him." The next moment, he kissed me on the lips. Unlike the tentative explorations in high school, this time, it felt like he wanted to devour me. The kiss deepened. After a while, he let go of me. Our eyes met, and in the midst of the surrounding warmth, a thin layer of ambiguity rose under the stimulant called flotation. Nick's voice lowered. Nora. He forced me into a corner of the sofa. As the distance between us shortened, I suddenly remembered something and pushed him away. Seriously asking, Nick, did you use the hand that just touched my foot to touch my face? All the romance dissipated. Nick closed his eyes, chuckled in frustration, and then turned and locked himself in the bathroom. Even if I was infatuated with Nick, I couldn't give up $500,000 right away. So, the next morning, I quietly left and went back to school. I planned to think things through. Unexpectedly, Jason was waiting downstairs at the dorm building early in the morning. Is there something wrong? He didn't speak, just silently extinguished his cigarette. As I approached, the smell of smoke was heavy. Jason lowered his eyes and without a word, he unwrapped my scarf. What are you doing? I was completely puzzled by my boss today. His gaze roamed over my neck, as if checking something. Then, he seemed to let out a sigh of relief and quickly helped me secure it back. Stepping back, I avoided his hand. Jason pinched his eyebrows before speaking in a calm tone. Anna and I are just friends, don't be angry, okay? I shook my head and buried the lower half of my face in the scarf. You don't have to explain to me, we agreed not to interfere with each other. Jason scrutinized my expression. Are you sulking? Are you still upset that I suggested not interfering with each other's lives? So annoying. What was he trying to strategize? Before I could respond, he grabbed my wrist and pulled me closer. His tone was serious. Nora, I can nullify the contract. I allow you to enter my life. If the contract is annulled, I really lose the $500,000. I sighed and reluctantly accepted. I asked him sincerely, so, this nullification of the contract was your suggestion. I shouldn't have to pay a penalty, right? I should still get the $500,000 from the first half of the year. I seemed to have angered Jason. He stared at me cryptically for a long time. Finally, he left without saying a word. Back in the dorm, I was surprised to find my 3 roommates awake unusually early that day. They were huddled together discussing. Wait, is Nick really coming to our school to shoot a drama? My long-awaited big brother is finally coming out. I also like him. I heard the female lead is currently being auditioned, saying even amateurs can sign up. So, they're coming to our school to film? I blinked, feeling a bit sleepy. I was just thinking of taking a nap. Rumor has it that the principal values this a lot. They say if someone from our school gets selected, there's a $50,000 bonus. I instantly opened my eyes, clear and bright. Really? That noon, I was in line to audition for the role and coincidentally ran into Anna and Jason. Looking me over, Anna said, Nora, are you also trying to enter the entertainment circle? I couldn't be bothered to explain. If I started talking, she might have a heart attack from being scared. Let me tell you, the role of the second female lead in this drama has already been predetermined for me. It's just a matter of investing a few million. Given Anna's acting skills, I really didn't understand why she would spend money to go on TV and be criticized. Jason seemed to still be upset about the morning. He glanced at me indifferently before looking away. Suddenly, Anna exclaimed, gossiping as she looked at me. Nora, tell me honestly, did you come to audition because you can kiss Nick? Jason's gaze instantly fell on me. She continued, but don't worry, Nick's kissing scenes always use body doubles. I was stunned, nervously asking, is it really using body doubles? Kissing strangers for $5,000? Jason seemed to have finally had enough and pulled me out of the line. Did you really come here to kiss him? His eyes were grim, his voice tense. Nora, if you want to kiss someone that badly, why not kiss me? At least I'm your official boyfriend. Anna stood by with a frown, watching closely as Jason pulled me into his arms, only to be interrupted by a stranger. Sorry, Nora, someone is looking for you, he said, pointing to a black sedan parked nearby. I understood and nodded, surprised by Jason's unusual sensitivity. He held on to me firmly, questioning if it was the man I had heard over the phone last night. Annoyed, I pushed him away, telling him not to interfere. As I got into the car, the man who was probably Nick's assistant stopped Jason. Nick took off his baseball cap, looking at me with a hint of a smile. He then pulled me onto his lap, his handsome features coming into view up close. "Does he know what you did with me last night?" he asked. Sitting in his lap, I shook my head honestly. "You wanted me to be your mistress, right?" I asked sarcastically. Nick didn't answer but instead bit my lips, his voice soft as he expressed his willingness to do anything for me. Feeling emotional, I couldn't bear to see Nick so vulnerable. Just as I was about to tell him the truth, my attention was diverted by an announcement outside. Devastated by the news that the prize money was gone, I spent days feeling disheartened. However, Nick's clinginess surprised me. "The leading lady auditions are happening now," my roommate suddenly shouted, but I was preoccupied with a phone call from my boss, Jason, urging me to meet him downstairs. Knowing the money was not yet secure, I tried to calm myself down. Jason immediately questioned me about my acquaintance with Nick, leaving me shocked. I realized that he knew about the night Nick took me away. Jason's temper always escalated calmly, terrifyingly. I took a step back, but his next question about Nick's potential betrayal pushed me to confront him. Eventually, I demanded to end our contract, declaring a clean break between us. "So, I won't even have to pay the penalty." Feeling slightly better. When I returned to Nick, I couldn't help but walk a little faster, feeling excited. In Nick's apartment, I was being punished. I knelt on Nick's legs, my wrists tied with a tie. The other end in Nick's hand. "It's tough, being a paid girlfriend," he said while tugging at my hands. I couldn't kneel steadily and ended up falling towards him. "I'm just in it for the money, and I can get 1 million just for a name." I still stood my ground. Refusing is just stupid. Nick stared deeply at me, then suddenly pulled me into his arms completely. "Nora, let's make a deal. I have more money now than before. I'll give it all to you, be your real girlfriend without just a name. How about it?" I looked at him in silence. He might not know it, but beneath his calm facade, there was visible nervousness. I held his tightly clenched hand, lightly kissed his knuckles. "I saved a lot of money myself, Nick, I forgot to tell you." His gaze passed over the hand I was holding. "What?" "Since I saw you again, I've thought about giving up the promised 500,000 from Jason for the next 6 months. Finally, I managed to win Nick over and he promised to make up for it with many more 500,000s. Reunion and friction can lead to a blazing fire. The first time we met, I already sensed Nick's sensitivity. I was kissed into a daze. When I regained consciousness, I found myself lying on Nick's bed. "What should we do next?" I asked him softly, feeling shy. Nick looked down at me and casually said 2 words, "Take it off." I didn't want to ask if he had been with other girlfriends in the past 3 years. If he had, I said I'd understand. But I didn't want to know. However, it seems that things weren't as they appeared. Nick, with his award-winning acting skills, was running the show on the surface, but in reality, clueless. How should this be used? "I'll do it myself." "But why do I feel like you've put it on backward?" I don't know how long it took. The process was clumsy. Later, Nick said that day was his biggest embarrassment. Because he lost his first battle. "Nick," I patted his back and comforted his silent self. "My roommate told me this is normal." Nick didn't react. I rubbed his head, trying to comfort him. "I think you are actually quite good." It seemed like that sentence hit a nerve with him. My sight was once again blocked by the blanket. It took a while. Nick finally regained his composure. And I was just as ordinary as a wooden board, feeling lifeless. Unexpectedly, one after another. Late into the night before falling asleep, I advised Nick not to publicly date as a celebrity. But the next day, I was halfway into the entertainment circle. I didn't even sign up, but why am I the female lead? Nick yawned, his bathrobe slightly open, collarbones still showing faint bite marks. I took half an hour to accept the fact that I was going to be on TV. The low-budget series would start filming in a month and a half. I was still calculating when an unfamiliar phone call came in. Coincidentally, Nick came out of the bathroom. "Nora, you won't have a chance to come back to me." Anna's voice was hoarse. Through the phone, I could sense the indifference in her words. "I'm with Anna now." I locked eyes with Nick. I instinctively felt a hint of danger. "Well, I wish you both the best." Under Nick's fiery gaze, I hung up the phone expressionlessly. But I couldn't escape Nick's reprimand in the end. "You're not punishing me, you're just doing what you want." I complained, but felt powerless. "You're just doing what you want." Nick grabbed the hand on his shoulder that I was pushing away and kissed it. "What do you mean?" I didn't want to do anything that would trigger Nick's sensitivities. I pursed my lips, silent. For the next month and a half, I took classes in acting and other courses while still attending school. Finally, during winter break, I barely passed. Anna walked gracefully over to me, with Jason standing next to her. "I don't know how you managed to become the female lead, but I welcome you." Anna raised her hand, admiring her manicure, saying leisurely. I didn't speak hastily. I knew she must have something to say. Sure enough, I just saw Nick's body double. Her eyes gradually filled with pity. "Let me tell you now, I can smell his bad breath even if I stand a meter away." Anna couldn't help but smile. "I heard you have several kissing scenes with him." She still didn't know that Nick and I were together. Jason hadn't told her. When I lifted my head, I unexpectedly met his gaze. But quickly, Jason turned his head away, frowning. Unnoticed by everyone, not far away, Nick's body double was observing everything. Anna, as if she heard something very funny, burst into uncontrollable laughter. Growing impatient, I cut her off directly. "You have something in your teeth." The laughter abruptly stopped. Anna closed her mouth in silence, her face showing embarrassed confusion. With the resolve of a newly emerging starlet, she swiftly ran back to her trailer, keeping her mouth shut. Jason's gaze shifted from her and landed firmly on me. "He doesn't want to go public with you?" Stirring up issues between me and Nick again. I turned around to leave. "Nora, I have one last question for you." Jason's voice was deep, his tone subtly humble. "Have you felt even the slightest attraction to me in the past 6 months?" I turned back to look into his eyes, shaking my head without hesitation. "No, Jason." The boy's eyes dimmed again. As I walked in the opposite direction, I remembered a day 3 months ago. After class, as I left the classroom, I could hear sporadic teasing laughter behind me. I wanted to pursue her, but I didn't know if she had a boyfriend. Go for it. Even though her boyfriend is Jason, he doesn't pay any attention to her. If you pursue her, maybe Jason would be willing to share her with you, a voice said. I hesitated, worried about a confrontation and the possibility of being beaten up by those guys, especially one of them who had a history of hitting girls. The malicious laughter behind me abruptly stopped. I stopped walking, looking up at Jason standing in front of me. What's going on here? Bullying my girlfriend? He pressed my shoulder, turned around, and faced the group of people behind us. Go pick on those guys with big mouths, Jason said, the guys looking nervous and hesitant. Jason seemed to understand my concern and raised his eyebrows confidently. Go ahead, I've got your back. After falling for Nick, even though we had been broken up for so long, I hadn't felt attracted to any other guy. But because of that day, in the river of memories filled with Nick, I had a very brief glimpse of Jason. Even though it couldn't be considered as being attracted to him. I took a deep breath and refocused. I heard the director calling my name from not far away, so I looked in that direction. Nick, next to the director, couldn't hide his displeasure behind his sunglasses. Let's see this part. If everything is okay, we can start, the director said. Pointing at a certain part of the script, Nick didn't even look at it and proposed, I suggest adding a line. What line? Nick raised his index finger and, without expression, said, in these 6 months, have you ever felt any affection towards me? Due to the day's schedule, I didn't have a chance to explain to Nick alone. This further fueled his anger into the night. Just as I returned to the hotel room, someone knocked on the door. Nick stood at the door with a script in hand, looking cold. The girl from the opposite room poked her head out upon hearing the commotion. She's a very innocent girl both on and off the stage. What are you guys doing? Nick raised the script and said, I'm looking for Nora to rehearse. She didn't suspect anything, nodded, and then closed the door. Jason entered the room and locked the door. He stared at me intently without blinking. I was on edge, swallowing involuntarily. You should listen to my explanation first. The next second, I was caught off guard and lifted up against the cabinet. Instead of talking, I'd rather see you do something practical as compensation. I blinked, about to say something when the knocking interrupted us. I tensed up immediately, asking, who is it? It's me, said the girl from before. I wanted to rehearse with you both, is that okay? Nick left her for me to handle and had already started unbuttoning my shirt. Hold on a moment, I reminded him softly. Ignoring me, Nick's hands were already at my back, fumbling with the buttons. I had no choice but to keep a steady breath and apologize to the girl outside. Nick just left, it's too late tonight, can we do it tomorrow, okay? The girl sighed softly and muttered, okay, before leaving. Nick then lifted his head from below my collarbone. With a teasing tone, he repeated, Nick? In that pose, I was carried back to bed by Nick. Nick will guide you in a new course tonight, I shuddered. What new course? How to act in intimate scenes. He held my hand, interlocking fingers, and got engrossed in it. Nick had surprisingly good stamina. After coming out of the bathroom, I could barely keep my eyelids up. Nick didn't say anything, and my drowsiness was interrupted by his abrupt question. Is your current habit of saving money related to the reason you insisted on breaking up with me back then? I turned around, opened my eyes, and memories of creditors appeared in my mind, splashing paint on my door, causing trouble, and even taking pictures of me and my mom in a chaotic manner. Owing $800,000. Nick's family was indeed well off at the time. But how could I, as an old lover, have the face to ask him for $800,000 to help out? Keeping my eyes half opened, I turned back and buried myself in Nick's embrace. So tired, Nick, I mumbled as I rubbed against his neck, jokingly saying, I'm so tired, could I be pregnant? Nick scoffed lightly, not asking further, just holding me tighter. Anna continued her scheming after Jason left, revealing her true colors. Actually, director, I think we can add a bit more of Nick and me in the story to make the narrative more complete. The award-winning screenwriter next to her sneered and continued writing without saying a word. After pondering for a moment, the director looked at Nick sitting in the chair next to me. What does Nick say? Nick discreetly let go of my hand, whispering, I can accept adding intimate scenes. Anna's eyes sparkled. Really, Nick? Nick ignored her, directing his words to the director and screenwriter. I can only accept adding scenes with me and Nora. Anna immediately looked at me with a hint of hostility. Why? Given what I know about Nick, his words were a blow. Tapping his knee absent-mindedly, Nick said, Anna, that piece of vegetable stuck in your left incisor since this morning is still there. How can I do intimate scenes with you? In front of everyone, Anna immediately covered her mouth. She turned away from us, took out a small mirror and checked herself. When she turned back, she looked confident again. No, thanks, Nick signaled his assistant to pass a piece of gum over to Anna. I thought the unique gas from Anna's mouth was because she hid some snacks in her teeth. Now it seems maybe it's just your personal scent, the gum is for you. Anna blushed and paled alternately. Actually, she didn't have bad breath. For those who didn't know the context, they would think Nick was deliberately picking on her. After leaving, I saw Nick patting the shoulder of the guy who played his body double. In fact, a crew member brought a box of his homemade pickled garlic for many people present. The guy playing Nick's double also tried some. The strong smell was not just coming from him, but Anna saw it all and deliberately misled everyone. Nick could be considered helping the newcomer out. Anna received her final blow when she saw Nick and I filming a kissing scene together. Wasn't it rumored that Nick never did kissing scenes himself? Facing the questioning, Nick unusually looked seriously at everyone. I used to be unprofessional. Fortunately, Nora helped me fix this issue. To show my sincerity, I can even allow a few more kissing scenes. I covered my swollen lips sucked by him, and pinched his waist fiercely in a place where no one was looking. Perhaps I pinched a bit too hard. That night happened to be a dinner gathering hosted by the director. During the meal, the assistant director noticed Nick massaging his waist a bit and smirked meaningfully. "Waiter, please bring a plate of oysters to our table." "Oh, place it in front of Nick." Others at the table understood and awkwardly cleared their throats. Nick gritted his teeth, looking at me with a dark face. I received the message he wanted to convey very well. "Nora, you're done." Nick sneaked into my room late at night after everyone was asleep. "You've done a great job." He came in and pushed me against the door before starting to kiss me. With his other hand, he tried to grab my hand and touch the trouble caused by the oysters. "You'll have no scenes tomorrow, right?" he said, while repeatedly rubbing his lips against my neck. With no way out, I had to lean my head on his shoulder and whisper a plea. "Nick, please. I beg you." I gestured with 3 fingers. "It really can't be more than this. Otherwise, I'll be in big trouble." Nick agreed promptly. Later, as I saw the sky turning slightly red, and felt exhausted and helpless, it finally dawned on me that a man's promises in the heat of passion couldn't be trusted. I always woke up abruptly after a satisfying night, this time because I was on the trending searches. Expecting to be criticized, I hesitantly checked the comments. The tide hadn't turned for the worse, so I decided not to interfere. That whole day, Nick and I essentially took a day off. In the evening, we dressed up and armed ourselves to take a stroll in the nearby countryside. Unexpectedly, this scene was caught by undercover reporters who had been waiting to capture it. It was immediately posted online. "Nora." The voice of the guy sounded as melodious and refreshing as it did 3 years ago. I turned around and saw him standing not far away, a serious smile on his face. "Do you like me?" I glanced at the desolate surroundings. Then, before Nick could react, I ran into his arms on the cobblestone path. "I like you so much." Nick caught me, hugged me back, and softly said, "Then give me a title." Seeing the seriousness in his eyes, I suddenly had a hunch and checked social media. It froze me. I clicked again and saw the top post by Nick. It said, "This is the 6th year I've liked you, Nora.